I moved to an area out in the middle of nowhere. It's desolate and in deep forest/woods. It's old Native American country, and it's an area racked by poverty, drug addiction, and a rapidly failing economy due to state and local authorities draining the life out of the entire state and into their own pockets, while creating engineered poverty and class instability. I used to drive 8 to 10 hours a day across the surrounding states, as well as the entirety of this state, as a field service technician for a commercial and rural GPS company. In the area that I moved to, I feel extremely uneasy and on edge when I drive through this one area near my house. There's crosses on the side of the road, marking where people have died in automobile accidents, and through this single stretch, there's a large concentration of those crosses. I didn't really start noticing that until I started having sightings of something. This area has old legends about skinwalkers and rougarous. One night, it was around midnight, it was storming, and I was fed up with driving and hurrying to get home. I hit the area mentioned above, and when I was going around a curve, when I came out of the curve I saw something run across the road, and it looked nothing whatsoever like any deer, bear, coyotes, dog, anything that I'm used to seeing. It looked like a person running on all four appendages, but they were so tall, so skinny, and had what looked like white fur dangling. I caught a flash of bright, yellow eye flashing back at me from my headlights. It was late, I was exhausted, but no matter how much I tried to force my brain to think logically, I was overcome with primal fear, and floored it to get home. I turned onto the drive up my mostly desolate, winding, long, 3-mile road to my house. That's about 8 miles from where I saw the thing. When I got closer to my house, I saw in the woods, the outline of what looked like a person, but way too tall and skinny, standing back in the darkness of the tree line. By this point I had my 9mm out and ready, because I didn't know what the hell was going on and I wasn't taking any chances. I pulled up to my house, grabbed my bag that I carry with me everywhere, and ran up the stairs to my front door. Everything in the woods around me was croaking, chirping, and making the usual noises, but then I heard the crackle of something large walking through the woods. I hear deer out there constantly, but this wasn't that kind of cautious rustling. Everything in the woods suddenly went dead quiet. I sat there at my front door, on my porch, looking over at the tree line, waiting to see if I'm just taking myself out, or if there's something truly ominous stalking me. I sat there for a few minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I heard the walking noises in the woods and a ragged breathing noise, but then it went silent. I decided to go inside and keep my pistol in reach. I fell asleep about an hour later on the couch, and had the most vivid, horrifying dreams. I dreamt that it came into my home. That I couldn't force myself to move, it climbed up on my chest, looked me in the eyes with its horrifying, menacing eyes. Its skeletal, animalistic, haunting face, that looked like its white skin was pulled, ripped, over its abomination of a head. It spoke, but without any movement of its torn mouth. It told me that it's going to feed on me slowly, that it will devour my life and everything in it. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, with my wife standing over me, trying to comfort me and asking what was going on. She told me that when she woke up and came into the living room, that I had left the front door open. I very much remember closing, locking, and chaining my front door. I've had 3 other sightings since that night, and every time I've seen this thing, it's been standing back in the woods, watching me. I honestly began entertaining the thought that I was losing my mind. My health began going downhill right afterwards. I lost my job due to my health, and I was convincing myself that I was just having a dissociative break from stress. My eldest son came up to stay with me for a few weeks ago. He was attending a class to get a certification, so he chose to come visit us and drive 3 hours to his class and back, 2 times a week. I chose to drive him there because this area is completely unlike what he's used to driving and living in, so I just wanted to make sure that he was safe while visiting us. The first trip, in the way back home, when we hit that area, we were having random conversation, catching up from not seeing each other while he was stationed far away for 3 years. We hit the area where all of this nightmare began, and I heard him let out a frightened half-scream. He yelled, "What the fuck was that?" He turned and looked at me, his eyes were full of tears. His face was pale and he looked like he just witnessed something horrific. I was scared to even ask what he saw, because I knew what he was going to say. He described my nightmare to every last detail. He's felt extremely on edge the entire time that he's been here. We passed by there 2 nights later and stopped to make sure that it wasn't something there that could just play tricks on the eyes, and there was absolutely nothing there but trees. And a deer carcass that looked shredded. It looked ripped apart. No head or legs, but none of it was cut like a hunter had cleaned the deer. It had rips and tears all over it, and it had its fur still on the torso. It could have been a bear, bobcat, coyotes, but it was exactly at the spot where he saw the creature, and there was blood splatter leading into the woods that looked like something was dragged. There's something out in these woods. I don't know what it is and can't truly find an exact description that lines up with what we've experienced. There's hunting clubs up here and hunters everywhere, but they're always gone by noon. I've asked around to see if anyone has any stories, and most just laughs me off, but a few have told me the local legends of the Rougarou and skinwalkers. I don't know what to think anymore, but I do have a good stockpile of bullets now, ready to go, just in case. I've never cared about guns and I've never been into hunting, but since moving here I've purchased some rifles and handguns. This is not my story, but a story my grandmother told me. In the early 1980s, my grandma was driving her pickup truck in a rural town in North Carolina with a friend on a back road with no street lights. It was out in the country along a stretch of road with almost no houses. Back roads with woods in every direction type of deal. They came around a curve and went over the railroad track. It was very dark and the only light was the reflection of the moon and the headlights from the truck. As she slowed down to cross over the tracks, she said she and her friend saw what looked like a part-man part-goat hybrid standing on the edge of the road in the woods, illuminated by the headlights. It had the head of a human with horns and was standing upright on its hind legs with hooves for feet. She said if she had to guess, it was at least 7 to 8 feet tall based on how it looked next to the trees. It had the upper torso of a man, but she described it as so evil-looking to the point that it almost didn't look human. My grandma told her friend to shut and lock the slide window of the truck that went to the bed because she was worried it could have jumped in the back of the bed. About a month later, my grandma was riding with my grandpa in the same pickup truck, traveling along another rural country road heading towards Highway 109. My grandma was asleep, but my grandpa woke her up and let her know that he saw a man-goat creature on the side of the road and described the same thing. This was about 50 miles away from the first sighting, and my grandma hadn't told him about the original sighting, so he wasn't lying or joking with her. I'm 18 years old and I live in Central California. Many nights I go outside to enjoy the cool breeze and bright stars above in my family's back field, only about 3.8 acres or so. Tonight was like many others. It was warm in my room and I couldn't sleep, so I figured I was going to go lay on top of one of our storage crates and stargaze. I get out of bed and go out my sliding glass door as to not wake my family. First I get some sandals and take a piss on one of the trees. Take my time going towards the back of the property where it is completely barren and flat, when I see something odd. Standing at about 2 feet tall, at first I had thought it may be a skunk's tail or possibly a cat/coyote. I then noticed in the bright light of the moon it had very humanly been walking on 2 legs. Very oddly shaped as a moderately obese human, but only 1/4 the size of one. I had jumped to the conclusion that I was tired and had been seeing things, so I did what every cliché horror movie girl does, I walked towards it. It somewhat began to flee, running behind the storage crate I intended to lay on top of. I at this point, am somewhat spooked, which is not something that normally happens to me, as said I would go in the dark outside nearly every night for about a year. I've gotten so accustomed to the layout of the property I hadn't thought to bring a flashlight as I've only ran into coyotes maybe a dozen times. Anyway, I'm walking back towards the house looking over my shoulder, and it comes from behind the crate and begins slowly walking towards me. I turn around fully and it ever so humanly runs into a cluster of trees and weeds that our old chicken coop was next to. I'm freaked out at this point, because I know this wasn't something like a skunk or a cat. I'm walking back whilst looking all directions, scaring myself thinking it was gonna be right in front of me. In what seemed like a year I got back to my sliding glass door where I was about to open it and it's looking at me from behind a corner of the house. I jump into my room and hear what sounds like a obese chihuahua attempting to take a pathetic breath but far more volume and much higher pitch. Not a fox scream, we have those here often and I know exactly what they sound like. Scared me so bad I ran to my closet and loaded my .22 Ruger, but never went back outside. My sister was the one who recommended I post this on here because there are a lot of you who have experienced something similar.
Did you see any prominent features or was it too dark?
When I came back to my house I saw its skin was a grayish blue color. I didn't notice much hair if any at all. It sort of looked like a goblin, but a stockier build. Earlier this year in March I was in my work van driving from Warninglid to Littlehampton, West Sussex, to start my deliveries. It was early morning around 5 a.m., still pitch black but weather was clear. I was driving southbound on the A24 and had just passed the southern tip of the village of Ashington, soon to be approaching the Storrington roundabout. On my left-hand side there is a section of grass that runs for a few hundred feet and is about 6 feet wide or so before it becomes a huge thicket of brambles. I saw a creature that I can only describe as cardboard box color. It was about 4 foot tall but down on its haunches to where its heels were touching its butt. It was facing diagonally away from me into the base of the bushes, so I saw its back and left side of its body more so than anything else. Its spine was showing and also ribs but not to the extreme, and it had small round ears that were in the location of a human's but shaped in a similar way as to what a black bear's are. It had a tail that rose up into a subtle S shape, was very skinny and seemed to be hairless like the rest of the animal. The face from what I could see had a muzzle but not extremely pronounced, and it seemed to be tracking something in the grass. My guess would be some kind of rodent. Its head movements were very digital and all over the place, and it jumped like how a fox would when pouncing, but in doing so I saw the soles of the feet, which I remember extremely clearly as they looked like ours. But given the hours that I'm awake, and the fact I'm a proper country boy, I see multiple foxes on a daily. This was as far from a fox as a monkey is. It was nothing I had ever seen before in person, on internet or in books. The duration lasted about 5 seconds, and as soon as I saw it, I had shivers all over my body and I literally said out loud, "What the F***K was that?" I couldn't believe my eyes. I got to the roundabout probably 30 seconds later and doubled back on myself to get back into the same road again in hopes I could get a second glimpse, but I wasn't lucky. The thing about it all that was almost stranger than the sighting itself was that I had such a strong feeling of shame that came over me. I felt so shameful in seeing it and have no idea why. I remember being in tears because of it, and I don't fully understand why, but I felt like I had no business seeing it, and if I had a regular job that never required me to be up so early then I never would have. Still no idea what it was. If anyone has seen anything similar please share, or has any insight I'd appreciate it. Thank you.